The only thing we have to
Beer.
is
Beer.
itself.
Beer. So many choices.
Only no function beer well without.
Woohoo! Beer! Hello and welcome to another episode of Beer Busters. We'll bring you the news and reviews of your favorite brews. I'm Dan Baker, joined by my co-host and brewologist,
Steph Hefner.
and of course the demented and fermented
Wayne Baker.
We are, we're here. We're doing another episode, and we mentioned last time that some of the format may be in flux a little bit as schedules will change. Today is no exception to that circumstance. What is going to happen, and we're going to see how it plays out in podcast time versus real time, because we all know overall time is a construct and nothing really matters anymore. We were supposed to be joined by our guest, Tara Nurin, but earlier today we found out she was a little under the weather and asked to reschedule, and we were scheduled for a date to talk to her when I'm on vacation. So we're doing the rest of the episode as the three of us. Then Wayne and Steph will carry on and do the interview while I'm away drinking my face off in Vegas and or LA and having the best damn chicken sandwich of my life. Oh, chicken sandwich. I'm so hungry. I'm so hungry at the moment. But that's what's going to happen with this episode. And of course, if you want to follow along and see into the details, don't forget you can follow us on the interwebs. We're at Beer Busters on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. I had to work that into the intro. Facebook, we are Beer Busters Podcast. There's also beerbusterspodcast.com. And remember to add /shop on there so you can get yourself some merch. YouTube, we are Beer Busters Podcast. There's also patreon.com/beerbusters where you can get yourself access to things like Last Call and the behind-the-scenes feed and plenty of other goodies that may come down the pike. Pike? Is it pike or pipe? I never know.
I think it's pike.
Is it pike?
Down the pike.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those commonly misunderstood phrases. There's one that I can't think of. It's on like the tip of my brain and I can't think of it.
But not the tip of your tongue.
But not the tip of my tongue. It's on the tip of my brain. Like pedal stool.
A pedal stool!
That's not the example I was thinking of, but that works.
What was that? Was that IT Crowd?
That was IT Crowd.
Okay, all right. I just remember it was Chris O'Dowd.
Yes.
So yeah, that is basically what's going to happen with this episode, and there's a lot of topics. We're going to continue conversations that we've been having the last few episodes because they're very important conversations to be had. And I can't wait to hear the conversation that you guys have with Tara, because I was really looking forward to having that conversation with her tonight. But it's understandable, if you're under the weather, you got to make sure you rest. Take time to rest and feel better. We are drinking some beers. Wayne and I are drinking the last two cans that we have of Brave Noise, which we had a couple episodes ago. Steph, you recently traveled. Your brother was in the state, and you went to see him out in Pittsburgh. And from what I understand, Kevin Keller joined you a little bit. He tried to get me to go out this weekend too, but I couldn't. But you have an appropriate beer that you were telling us about before we started recording. What are you drinking? Let listeners in on the picture.
Yeah, so I actually had plans to meet up with Kevin Keller for a beer while we were out there, but it just didn't work out. He was out with his prototype family doing a dessert beer fest. Yeah. So I wasn't surprised when he told me that he was trying to encourage you to come out, because I feel like that is totally up your alley. But we tried to meet up and it just didn't work out. And then after the fact, we actually found out we were both at the same brewery at the same time and didn't even realize it at one point. But so is life. But it was a good time. Anyway, so yeah, I got to revisit a lot of Pittsburgh breweries that I haven't been to in a minute, and some new breweries that were a lot of fun. But I was excited / hesitant to visit the new Dancing Gnome location, which is literally 1 block away from their old location, but substantially bigger and really, really beautiful space. They actually have a parking lot. For those that have been there before, we know what a big deal that is when a brewery, especially in a city like Pittsburgh, has a parking lot. They have a really nice outdoor area and this beautiful wide open indoor space with a very long bar and a very efficient bar staff. That line was almost out the door and you did not wait too long to get up to the bar and get your beer. So I was really, really impressed with that. Their new brewery is insane how big it is. So I was really impressed with the space. But the reason I was hesitant is because the previous times I've been to Dancing Gnome, it was all hazy IPAs and one stout, which aren't, usually my jam. But I pulled up the website to see the tap list and I was shocked by the diversity of the beers they had on tap. I was so excited and so pleased. And right away, I was like, oh my God, we have to go there. One of the beers that we had was a Munich Dunkel, which I think was my favorite beer of the entire weekend. And I actually bought some cans of it to bring home because I enjoyed it so much. The Munich Dunkel, for the record, was called Jewel Wing Damselfly, which I learned is the name of a moth.
Jewel Wing Damselfly?
Yes.
Wow.
But in addition, they had an alt beer on that was really good. They had a brown ale, which they had both on nitro and not on nitro. They had a mild that was really amazing. And they also had a bitter and two different cream ales and a golden ale in cans. And I was just like blown away. I mean, of course, they still had their usual IPAs and West Coast IPAs and pale ales. I mean, they had so many beers on tap, an imperial stout. That we did try the one stout that was really good. But anyway, I digress. So when I was deciding what beers I wanted to get to go, I noticed on the tap list, there was this beer called She Knows Beer. And it has, you know, the universal symbol for female on the can. So of course I was like, oh, what is this beer about? So I pulled up the description, and the description of the beer just says it is a vibrant red ale designed and brewed by the talented women at Dancing Gnome in collaboration with the Pittsburgh Brewery Diversity Council. So I was like, well, that is really cool. I definitely need to get this beer. So I bought it. And when I was reading a little bit further, one of the women, Katie from Dancing Gnome Beer, posted a short press release about the beer. And she said, that it is a 4.6% American red ale, an easy drinking beer with biscuit and tasty malt flavors. And she said, brewed to honor and support women in the brewing industry, and portions of the proceed from the collaboration will go to Planned Parenthood. It says, in a year where women have shared their experiences with sexism in the industry, I'm so honored and proud to live in a city that celebrates the great thing women and beer can do. So it was originally released Labor Day weekend. So I was super excited that they still had some, and I was able to pick up a 4-pack. But then I was like, okay, well, I want to know a little bit more about this Pittsburgh Brewery Diversity Group. And so they don't have a website quite yet. Their website is in process. So it must be a pretty new group of individuals in Pittsburgh. But they do have an Instagram page for anyone that's interested. It's PGH Brewery Diversity Council is their handle on Instagram. And the logo, as I mentioned, is the universal sign for female, and it says She Knows Beer in the middle. It's the logo for this beer project, which apparently is not just a beer that was brewed by Dancing Gnome. It's a whole project that was started by the Pittsburgh Brewery Diversity Council to celebrate women working in the beer industry and women in craft beer as a whole. And apparently there's a whole bunch of breweries that are creating a beer with this name. The person that did the logo, for anyone that's watched Port in PA, is Bailey from Grist House. I know she was interviewed on the episode that they did about people that design the logos and the cans and the imagery and such. She was interviewed on there. So she's the one that designed this logo. And there's even a little interview with her on this page. So the first one, the inaugural celebration release of this beer, went all the way back to June. So I'm surprised this is the first time I'm hearing about this project. And it was with Necromancer Brewing and Trace Brewing, which Trace Brewing is another brewery that I got to check out, which has a super cool drive to increase diversity in the beer world with the paid internships that they are offering, which I think I mentioned in a previous episode. But they did their collaboration back in June. So the one that I picked up is the one from Dancing Gnome, which is a red ale. And I'm talking. I haven't even opened the can yet.
I'm surprised. I thought you did before we started recording.
No. It's been a crazy time, you know. It's been a crazy time, but and I'm so excited it's a red ale. Like, I love that breweries are making all of these styles that, like, we love so much, but nobody makes anymore.
Yeah, that list of styles you're rattling off that you saw at Dancing Gnome was very, very encouraging.
Yeah, I may have bought more cans to go from there than I was originally planning.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't get out there that often, and I couldn't resist all of them. But the funny thing is on their Instagram page, they also did a screenshot of an article in Forbes magazine by Tara Nurin, of course, that is headlined, "The Surprising City May Be Leading the World in Brewery Diversity and Inclusion, and Here's How." So I mean, I thought this beer was perfect just because what it represented and who we're going to be talking to tonight on the show. But I mean, I'm excited to even ask Tara about this project as well. So it's just like, it seems too perfect and it's all interconnected here. But so anyone that is in the Pittsburgh area or traveling to the Pittsburgh area, keep a lookout for She Knows Beer and follow them on Instagram because it seems like they're doing a lot of great things. So the women from Dancing Gnome that were part of this project were Emily, who's their packaging manager, Katie, who's a brewer, and another Katie, who is a packaging associate. So those were the three women from Dancing Gnome that worked on the project and in collaboration with the Pittsburgh Brewery Diversity Council. And the can is also purple, so that's kind of cool.
Can't go wrong with that. That's pretty cool. And yeah, it's surprising we haven't heard of this, not just this beer project, but also the Pittsburgh Brewery Diversity Council in general. It does sound, like you said, like it's a fairly new initiative, but it's very cool to see those steps being taken in our sister city in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, some people might hate that you call it that, but I think so.
I'm fine with it.
Let's just not talk about sports with anybody from out there.
No, I don't talk about sports with anyone ever. So.
That's true.
Fun fact, my brother is going to the Steelers game tonight. It will be his first ever football game.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good stadium. I think he'll like it. He'll have fun.
So you guys are drinking. Did you say you broke open some?
We still have
Brave
2 cans
Noise,
of Brave
yeah.
Noise. Obviously, the collaboration inspired by Brianne Allen and everything that she started on Instagram that led to all these important conversations that we're having. 4.5%. Is it pale ale?
Pale ale.
Pale ale. Yeah. We full disclosure, this as we mentioned, our format and recording schedules in flux. So we are recording this on a Monday night. So this is probably the only beer I'm going to drink.
More than likely.
In this portion of the episode, as Dan mentioned, there will be some time traveling happening a little later on. So maybe we'll crack another beer during our interview with Tara. But
I will definitely be having a beer with you in spirit at that point in time, for sure.
Definitely.
And if you're looking for ways to support the Brave Noise cause in particular, I know that she just recently released more T-shirts. The Pro Equity Beer Club fundraiser, they're the shirts that say anti-sexist, anti-racist, pro-equality beer club on the front. If you're on Instagram and paying attention to any of this, I'm sure you've seen tons of pictures of people wearing these shirts. But you can go to @Rat Magnet. She has the link to it on her page. And additionally, she also has stickers through Women of the Bevolution, another social media page that you should check out. It is $2 a sticker.
It's $4 for 2.
It's $4 for 2 stickers, and 100% of the money goes towards the cause. But they're super cute. We got a bunch of them that we've just been handing out to people. It literally is like a cartoon rat with a magnet, like, and it's trying to take the word sexism. Like, they're super cute.
That's cool.
So
that's cool.
even if you can't get your hands on Brave Noise, there are other ways that you can support the cause as well. So
now we're getting a picture.
We're showing Wayne and Dan what it looks like.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's funny. That reminds me of old like editorial cartoons.
Yeah,
like you'd
bit.
see in
Yeah.
the newspaper.
Wow.
Yeah, that's funny.
And I know there are a handful of breweries listed on the website. I know Iron Hill is on there. The other brewery that we were just mentioning from Pittsburgh was on there. And I had the tab open here somewhere. And of course, I have too many things open.
Too many tabs.
Here, Necromancer from Pittsburgh is on there. Zero Day from Harrisburg is on there. Love Draft from Harrisburg. Perkiomen Valley, Winding Path. But I know like Winridge Farm did it. There are some other breweries that aren't listed on the website, but just, pay attention. It's really cool to drink a tasty beer, perhaps a style you wouldn't normally gravitate towards, but also be part of the conversation. But this red ale is really tasty.
Good.
So the website for the Rat Magnet stickers is pintsandpanels.com if you're interested in the stickers. So speaking of Pittsburgh breweries, another brewery that I always love visiting is Grist House Brewing. And
that's
I always
the one
love
with
it
the
there.
dogs, right?
Yes. I always love visiting there because they have a really awesome outdoor space and there's always tons of dogs out there. And this time did not disappoint. We stood by a fire pit and there were just dogs everywhere. But for anyone who's been there before, they have a very small indoor space where the brewery is. And then there is a deck, which they have enclosed because it's kind of cold out. But they are building this massive second indoor outdoor kind of tap room thing on the lot, which I didn't even know they were doing. Right now, it's very much in the beginning stages of construction. So I'm not sure what the timeline is, but I was reading an article about it, and I think they said it was like 4,000 square feet. I could be making that up, but it's a massive, massive building right on their property for more space. So that's really exciting to see that they're expanding as well. Oh, and hold up, guys. Have you ever been to a brewery?
Yeah,
Have you
I
ever-
have.
A few, yeah.
Assholes. Have you ever been to a brewery where you literally order everything on your phone? You can start your own tab on your phone and they just bring the stuff to your table. And then when you're done, you just pay your tab and leave.
Yeah, I've been to a few that tried to do it. Like they still had like traditional servers that would come like you can run the tab through them. But yeah, I've been to a couple like that. I want to say one of the Sly Fox locations does that now.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I've
It
never
is
been.
Not gonna lie.
literally the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a great deal.
Last time I was at Sly Fox YO, I was already drunk by the time I got there, so I could very
Don't
well
remember the
be
procedure.
remembering this wrong.
Yeah, I may have ordered from a person or a phone. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell the difference at that point.
Yep. Who knows?
I do. Isn't there a restaurant in Japan? I think I saw on the internet where it's like you never have to see another person when you go there. Like you go in
perfect.
and you only ever see your dining party, or if you're alone, you don't see anybody. You go in, you order anything without talking to people. The food comes like through a slot to your table, and it's like very much like.
I have been led to believe that restaurants in Japan will serve you your food by like conveyor belt or random slot in the wall. Like it seems like that's the norm over there.
Yeah, well, I know they have restaurants there where it's like a carousel of things. And
Yeah,
kind of.
yeah.
I mean, I've seen things like that other places too, but that's what
Well,
what I thought of.
We went to Cinderlands, both their warehouse and their Food House locations. And it was the first time I'd ever experienced it. You scan the little QR code and then their menu comes up, which I'm used to. And then you scroll through and you can pick what you want ordered. And then you send your order, but you keep your tab open. And then they'll bring your beers and then your food or whatever, and then you can just keep ordering more stuff and people will just appear at your table and bring it.
Bring it to you.
And then
That's
when
cool.
you're done, and it's perfect, especially if you're with a group and you want separate checks.
Yeah, that is
Everyone
Yeah,
can
that's
just
easy.
And
everyone
anybody who
can
wants
just
to be together can just order together, or yeah.
exactly. You just pay how you want to pay. It's just like I hope this is something that they continue to do, and maybe other breweries will do as well.
Well, and the thing is, like the technology and the logistics to set up that sort of thing is like super easy now. Like everybody has online menus, online ordering systems are like all over the place.
Yeah,
It's
and if you
super
want
easy
to
to
get
implement.
fancy, you could have the QR code sticker on the table and bake in the table location, table
Yeah,
number
you could
into
even
that.
do
Like
that,
that's easy
yeah.
to do.
But when we were at Human Robot the last time, isn't that how the sandwich place did it? Where you place an order online for delivery, or something, and you put in your table number as like your delivery address or whatever, and they would just bring it into the brewery to you.
But you had to pay and close the tab in
Yeah.
order to put the order in. Where this,
Oh,
you
you
just
couldn't.
put a credit card in and it's saved, and you can just keep submitting stuff, but you don't actually have to close out your tab
Until the
until
end.
you're ready to leave.
Nice.
QR code is unique to the
Yeah,
table.
each QR code is unique to the table. So when you scan
Yeah.
it, it
So there it is.
automatically
Yep.
knows where
Yep.
your stuff is going to. So you can't F that up.
As I said, there's no way I had an original idea revolving around that. There's no way. Yeah, I do and don't like that system because we talked recently about the service industry and how people need to be paid better in it, but that could very well be something that takes the place of needing a server or more servers, and it's a fine line, and you could use that power for good or evil, and I really hope that more breweries are going to use it for good.
Well, and the other thing I think is it's the sort of technology that's gonna like put people out of jobs or take away jobs, because like as we know, there is a staff shortage going on in the brewery industry and the service industry at large, and I think a lot of that is because a lot of those people have decided to move into different industries.
Yeah.
And so there's less demand for those jobs. So if a restaurant can whittle away the number of employees they actually need to operate efficiently, it's a win-win because there's less people looking for those jobs anyway. So it's not like you're taking away jobs that people would be taking. You're just, streamlining your operation to work with fewer people. If that makes sense.
I think it does. Also, Moo is very intrigued by your hand movements.
I should have learned to land planes. I missed my calling.
I should have learned to land planes.
So I was looking up on Untapped on my phone what brewery I was at when I was in Pittsburgh, and we got like a day there, like a full 24 hours, including sleeping at the hotel overnight. And I want to go back and I want to experience more of that city because it was a really good time. We went to 412 Brewery, which was
the guy that founded this foundation is the guy from 412.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the beers there were great. We had a good conversation with the people behind the bar. It was very busy. It was a Saturday night. It was Memorial Day weekend, so of course it was busy. But it was really good. I had a really, really fun time there, and my friend that I was with took a 4-pack and I think a crowler of something home. And I kind of wish I would have done the same because everything I had there was really good. So that's on my list for next time I get back out there. I want to bring some stuff home from there.
Cool.
There's just so many places to check out anymore. It's so hard to get everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing in any city you go to. Like, people ask me all the time, where should I go in Philly? I'm like, I don't know. The things I would tell you are probably outdated by now anyway.
Yeah, I think it's like just open up Google and type restaurant or brewery.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many good places in Philly. You really can't go wrong. I didn't go anywhere interesting, but I was recently at Local 44 for the first time in a while.
Wow. It's been forever since I've been there.
That was nice. I had the East Branch Durbach Kolsch. It was very nice. First time I've had that.
Nice.
And I also had a Love City Lager, so
you have to.
Not super exciting.
I think that's going to be the next keg once I return the empty one from Totally
nice.
Wired.
That's a good keg beer.
Yeah.
And I was also recently at Dock Street.
Oh, yeah. I haven't been there in a while.
So that was nice, meeting up with some of Jess's friends
from
Harrisburg.
You, me, Jess, and Bridget went to Dock Street West.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I was at Dock Street South.
I've never been to
a couple
Dock
months
Street
ago.
South.
It was nice.
Yeah.
Sat outside. It was summer. It was a very nice evening. They have like special cocktails that are on there. I didn't get any. I know they have them at West too. Mm-hmm. But some of them sounded really good. But I just stuck with beer because I was on a first date and I didn't want to get overly drunk.
Fair.
But yeah, support your local breweries wherever you go.
Well, I'm especially excited about our guest tonight. She is someone who I've been following her articles and just her influence on the beer industry for so many years. Tara, she's the beer and spirits contributor to Forbes magazine, a freelancer who primarily covers lifestyle trends with a focus on craft beer, alcohol, and culinary tourism and their impact on economic development. She has been published in Food, Wine Enthusiast, USA Today, and many other additional media outlets. And she's even won first place awards for her journalism and for her articles. She is co-founder of Ferment Your Event, which leads craft beer pairings and seminars with a specialty in beer chocolate.
Oh, hey now.
And she teaches the craft beer course at Wilmington University. She also volunteers as an archivist for the International Pink Boots Society, which of course we know is for the advancement of women in beer. And she is an official beer judge. She is a Cicerone certified beer server and an urban pioneer on the scenic Camden, New Jersey waterfront. The reason I was motivated to reach out to her right now, of course, is not only everything that's going on and, our push for talks about diversity in the beer world, but she is the author of the recently released A Woman's Place in the Brew House, A Forgotten History of Alewives, Brewsters, Witches, and CEOs. And the book is amazing. I highly recommend it. It's kind of comforting reading it in a way, because it's giving these stories that no one else is telling, the stories of the women that have influenced beer from way long ago and the recent past. And it's like an easy to read textbook on women in beer, perhaps. But it's really nice to have this in in a book, just have it all organized together. And I'm excited to hear her story. And I can only imagine was a lot of work and time to dig up all of these stories and find them. And it was also really cool reading about women that we know that, we've interviewed or we've met or we know of them, and learning so many things about those women. I can't tell you how many times I've been like, oh my God, I didn't know this about her. Or, oh my God, did you know this about her? And, I've been putting Post-it notes in the book, which I'm going to have to weed out a little bit because I don't think I will have time to ask her everything I want to ask her about from the book. But I'm very, very excited to get to chat with her.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Tara. It's great to virtually meet you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited.
We went over a lot of your backstory and all the many amazing things you've been working on. And we talked a little bit before we kind of officially got started here about how, we as a podcast have recently tried to be active and involved in all the activity around diversity and inclusion in the craft beer industry and fighting against inequality that has existed recently, as that's sort of been a large issue in the beer world. And you're, of course, promoting a book all about the history of women in brewing, which I think adds an interesting historical context to these conversations that I haven't really seen come up in other places, which I think is really interesting. So I guess just to start, why don't you tell us what the inspiration was to start the project of this book?
Well, I've been covering women in beer for about 16 years as a journalist, and I'm close with Terry Ferendorf, who founded the Pink Boots Society for women in the alcohol space, and she basically told me to. Terry has very lofty goals for the women in her sphere, and she'd given me great ideas in the past, and I'd usually thought, what a good idea, I could never do that. But let's see, I guess it was 2015 or 2016. It was definitely a few years ago. We were on the phone and she said, Tara, no one's written a book about the history of women in beer before, and you need to write it. You're the one. And I was like, oh, okay. Lots of people write books and I'm a professional writer. I guess I could pull that off. So that's the idea. Terry gave me my idea, quote unquote. And I'm eternally grateful to her.
Very cool.
I think in the beginning of the book, the quote that I think best describes the need for this book is when you were talking to Charlie Corey. And he said, it was an honor to think of someone asking about my mom. They're always asking about my dad. That's actually when I picked up the Post-it notes. Before we started recording, I showed Tara all the Post-it notes I stuck in her book as I was reading it. But that was my first one. And I'm like, wow, that shows you how important this information is, because it's not out there.
That's right. And I love that you quoted that quote back to me, because there are a couple parts of the book that I actually kind of can't read without tearing up. And the main one that I think of is, well, it's more when I think about this as opposed to when I read it, but the fact that Charlie Corey said that about his mom, and independently, like 5 years later, Amy Finkel, Roseanne and Charlie Finkel's daughter, said the very same thing to me. And that just struck me very deeply. Both Shirley and Roseanne they're both deceased now, were incredible, dynamic Renaissance women with every right to receive as much credit as their husbands have. And to this day, I see Roseanne getting written out of the story, and her husband, Charles, is always, bringing as much credit to her as possible, but I see her actively get overlooked. So yes, I agree. Those two quotes right there kind of sum up why the book is needed. It's sometimes I say it's just so unfair, and I feel like I'm whining when I say that, but it is.
Well, and reading the book made me feel fortunate that I got into the beer world when I did. We started doing this podcast almost 9 years ago. And I joined my local homebrew club in 2013, and my first American Homebrewers Association conference, what I think they call it Homebrew Con now. I don't know. They call it something different than we called it NHC back then.
That's right.
But my first one was in 2013. And when I read where you talked about Annie Johnson, she was the first woman and first African-American to win the AHA's Homebrewer of the Year. And that was the year I went to my first AHA conference.
Nice.
So, for me, it just felt natural that women were in these roles. And I don't know that I appreciated it at the time that she was the first and how monumental that was. And she was and continues to go on to be such an amazing brewer. But I felt fortunate that I got into brewing at a time where women being part of it, it was visible to me, and it was also very much celebrated. When I went to my brewing school, I was one of only 2 women. The other woman was actually from Alaska, which I thought that was more cool, meeting someone that lived in the state of Alaska than being another woman. But, every time we had a group photo taken, they wanted us in the front, and, they always wanted us to have our pink boots on. And, and those, I just felt like, the attention was kind of cool, and we felt welcomed and celebrated. But then to read all of the history of the women from before and way before I got into brewing, I feel like it's about damn time we hear their stories. And you mentioned Terry, and I remember reading in the book when Whitney Thompson was still at Trogs, and they were having a conversation when they brewed together. And Whitney said, "You're a female brewer? I thought I was the only one." And it's like, these are powerful stories for women to know this history and the powerful connections that things like the Pink Boot Society have made to bring women together. Because you're right, as human beings, we need to be able to see ourselves in our own roles, even if it's like a role in a television show that you can relate to. Hey, that character is like me. And, the power to know there are other women that do this. I'm not the only one. Like, it seems silly, but wow, so powerful at the same time.
You'll be happy to know that somebody who was taking, I don't know exactly what course it was, but a woman I know, actually from Alaska, coincidentally, was just at Siebel a couple weeks ago for it. She might be taking the online course, and they get them together one time. I'm not exactly sure, but she said there were 4 other women there, and she confirmed with the administration that was the most women who had ever been taking a Siebel course at one time. So that's a victory. Yeah, I just met a woman the other night in Richmond, Virginia, who is a 20-something brewer, an amazing brewer, by the way. She had just finished the book, and she was, I dare say, crying, talking to me about what it meant to her. And she said, some other women her age who are brewers she had talked to, and they all felt the same way, that it gave them kind of context and meaning and purpose to know that they were part of something this big, that they didn't necessarily, they probably knew vaguely, women were the first brewers, and maybe they knew some more than that, but to really, put themselves into a history that is so deep and so wide, I feel like really changed her perspective on her job. And that was very moving.
And I've read in beer history texts, as it were, that how powerful just beer was in the history of mankind, like setting up civilizations and growing barley and that sort of thing. But I guess I wasn't aware how much the perception of women as brewers or alewives or witches even, that chapter sort of shocked me, how just perception of women overall in history and how rooted that is in brewing as well.
The perception of them or the malignment, is that a word? How maligned they've been throughout history.
Malignment, yeah. I like that.
Malignment, sure, we'll do it. Yeah, well, it's such a I don't know, it's such a loaded thread that we see throughout all of history, right? Like, women are threatening. Anybody who's threatening to the dominant paradigm, the dominant population, just gets smashed however it takes. And, people of color can certainly relate. And, people who are, maybe gender non-conforming, etc. People in power will do anything it takes to stay in power. And we see that today. It's terrifying.
And then the chapter that made me a little uncomfortable was prohibition. Just knowing this parallel between women fighting for their right to vote and fighting for their right to have a say, and at the same time having to have this stance with prohibition. It was like this dance, and you're right, we still see these things today, and politics is always a game, but just this idea of fighting for your right to vote might also mean that you have to also agree that alcohol is not okay, and you're for prohibition, because if you're not for prohibition, then it's going to appear that you are this way. And I was like, and then to even look at the timeline of history of the date of prohibition, and then when women finally got the right to vote, and you just let all of these parts of history sink into your mind. And I made the face. Our listeners can't see the face. I don't know if there's a word for like.
You threw up your hands. You like clutched your your face, and like threw up your hands. Yeah, it is crazy how, and we see women fight each other in that chapter, and maybe that's what you're really getting to. But right, you were a feminist and anti-alcohol, or you were like a bad feminist, basically. And the part about, the pro-temperance women smearing the pro-prohibition women smearing with a really cruel language the women who were working against prohibition, it is really telling, and we have to watch how we are as allies to one another. Women need to be allies to ourselves first, and then to one another, and realize, we might have different opinions or approaches, but ultimately we need to generally be in solidarity, or we're never going to get ahead. And I don't really like that answer, because I'm sorry, I keep forgetting my better points. I don't know. I don't feel like I really sort of am addressing what you're saying. Was that what you were saying?
No, absolutely. And I don't know that there is a straight answer. It's just, history is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's true, especially when you acknowledge the truth of our past and where we've come from, but then also seeing that things are still happening. Like hearing, Carol Stout talk about how people would say, "Let me try some of Ed's beer."
That's the quote that got me, because when you see these stories about people that I've personally met, and I've known Stouts my whole life. It's not far from where I've lived most of my life, and we've had Carol on the show, and so I think when you hear these stories that involve people that you personally know or have met, it does hit a little harder. I did want to ask, kind of on that same lines, in the context of everything that's going on in the brewing industry right now, and the renewed push for equality and representation, do you think these contemporary stories, I think, definitely impact the conversation, but do you think the historical stories that you dive into and the history of women in brewing, do you think that's an important story to bring to the conversation, both for people who are looking for inspiration as maybe a woman or an underrepresented group in brewing, or as a white guy saying, "Oh, I didn't realize how intertwined brewing history is with women, much so more so than men"? Do you think that helps the conversation?
I do. I think it can bring a level of respect that might not be there, and that is for both men and the women themselves in the industry. Like I said, the woman I was talking to the other night, I feel like knowing this history really rooted her more deeply in her career. And so I think that, you know, it's easy to get frustrated with your job, whatever it is, right? And it can be easy to get very worn down by your job if you're getting worn down by it every day with misogyny, etc. And it can be like, oh, I'm sick of this, I'm done, and leave. But I think knowing that women have been the caretakers of brewing for all of human civilization, and everything that they have endured throughout that time can make people facing some hard times sort of reground themselves in the history of it. And to realize that the more things change, the more they stay the same, unfortunately. And so it's up to us, all of us, whether we're white guys or women in the industry or just, you know, craft beer drinkers, to sort of fight to progress, as opposed to just seeing ourselves as like, oh, just one person who's getting sick of it and quitting. And that's happening a lot. I mean, I don't know if you've been talking about that if you've had guests on your show who've, you know, brought that up, but I am seeing a woman quit the industry who I know at least tangentially about every 2 weeks.
Wow.
And that's sad. So yeah, I do think, but you know, and maybe this is a tangent, but I have a funny, not so funny little story to share. In a very meaningful conversation I was having with a female brewer about the book, and she was telling me what it meant to her, and she was quite, you know, serious and emotional about it. There was a very well-meaning white guy standing with us, peripheral to the conversation. He was there with his wife, and they were lovely, and he was very supportive. And as soon as she finished telling me, you know, emotionally what this book meant to her, he goes, yeah, well, for me, blah, 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 and started just rambling and totally stole the moment. And it was so typical. My friend and I, like, very subtly kind of looked at each other because we both saw what was happening. And so even the men and the people with the best intentions it's like unconscious bias, right? We don't see that we're doing it. So the more, and this definitely is a tangent, but I think gets to, you know, your desire to talk about DEI, the more we can be aware of that in ourselves and in our friend groups, we can try to gently, you know, mitigate those innocent trespasses, I guess.
And
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
I think this book can be a teaching tool as well. We learn about history to learn from history. And, you know, we can say till we're blue in the face, like, as women, this is happening to us in the industry, but to actually have it written down and recorded and showing that this has been going on forever. I mean, even Cleopatra got shit for passing that tax. I mean, like, oh my gosh, you know, when you read it in text, like, these are things that are actually happening. These have been going on for a long time. So if people are educating themselves, hopefully there's that realization that maybe we shouldn't continue to repeat history. But in another vein, it's also perhaps giving comfort to some other people, saying, okay, I'm not the only one that feels this way, or I'm not the only one going through this, but now what can we do to change the conversation? And I guess that's sort of been the conversations that we've been having on the show a lot, is how can we help to push and how can we change the conversation?
You know, you mentioned Melissa Walter from Love City before we started recording, and they did something really cool at Love City in Philly. Within a couple weeks of the Me Too stuff breaking, happily, there were a lot of conversations with women in the industry that popped up around the country. You know, bar and brewery owners brought women together to talk about this stuff. Well, Love City went further and had a conversation with men the following week. And we all need to be getting together and talking about this stuff, both in gender segregated spaces and together. Because what I've really started saying lately is women who work in the industry, especially women at the top of, we'll just say breweries, although it's not just breweries that, you know, we're talking about women at the top of their companies, might be really working in isolation because let's say they own the brewery with their husband or something, and they might have female employees, but they don't necessarily have the same sort of really open conversations with their employees, and they don't have other women at their level within their business to talk to. So where are they going to get that support? Where are they going to find solidarity and air their grievances and know that they're not alone? I mean, groups like the Pink Boots are awesome, and the chapter events do that. And I think it's important for women as busy as we are to really try to make time for those in-person gatherings with other women. Because otherwise, I think it's easy to sort of go down the black hole of feeling like you are by yourself and I'm the only one who feels this way. I'm the only one who's dealing with this stuff. And then you go and you talk to like one or two other women who are, you know, at your same level-ish, or maybe not even, and you're like, oh, okay. Knowing that other people are going through the same thing as you, and then maybe brainstorming ideas, or at least providing each other like empathy is really helpful. And I think an important part of self-care as we go forward, and an important part of being better allies to one another. We need to talk to one another. We need to take that time out for ourselves, as busy as we might be, to network on a real, authentic, personal level with other women in the industry.
I think that's a really great point. I think we do need to feel that we're not alone and feel that empathy in order to feel empowered to move forward, whether that is just by healing or by speaking up and reporting or moving forward in some way. If you don't feel like you have someone to relate to, or I think moving forward becomes a lot more difficult. So I do agree that is quite powerful.
Yeah, you know, and I just thought of like, imagine you're a parent of a couple young kids, and maybe you work full time too, and none of your friends have kids, little kids or any kids, and you're like, I'm the only person who's ever gone through all this. What do I do? Like, it's hard for parents who don't have other parent friends, you know, to feel like they're doing the right thing. So I don't know, that just popped in my head as an example that probably a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And I think, you know, talking about having conversations both in gender segregated spaces and also all together is, I feel like the most important step that has come out of all this conversation and everything that's happening, because it's very important to express support. It's very important to create a code of conduct. It's very important to do these sorts of like things where you can say, here, look, we're doing this thing. But the most important thing, I think, is the back and forth and the conversations. And I think seeing that it's not just a lot of like lip service, because, you know, a lot of causes like this, you'll have companies that just like, yeah, we support this, but they don't really do much. But it's really inspiring to see a lot of breweries, particularly amongst the people that we've met, you know, in the beer world, actually setting aside the spaces to have these conversations. And, you know, we're trying to do that here on the podcast as well. And I think that's the most important step to address these things.
And listening, sorry to cut you off as I say it's important to listen and then I interrupt you.
Fair enough.
You know, we're talking about Philadelphia people, so I will give him a shout out. Normally I keep him anonymous, but it's a compliment. So my good friend Mike Locke, who owns Broken Goblet Brewing just north of Philly, he and I chatted a couple months after, you know, into all this, and he was like, Tara, I had no idea it was this bad. You know, he's like, I consider myself like a fairly woke guy. And, you know, I try to make sure my employees are happy, but like, I I didn't know. And so like he immediately created a position, or he had just actually hired a new general manager who was female. And he was like, this is going to be part of what she does. We need to make sure that we are dealing more directly with these issues if they come up, so that we're adequately prepared for any issues that may come up. And it gave me so much, I don't know, I felt very heartened to just see that people I mean, not that it doesn't affect men, because it does, but, you know, to see it, your average white guy brewery owner be like so moved and like really just feeling compelled to take some serious action, like you guys are on the show. You know, you've all read the comments, I'm sure, that have been taking place online in the months that followed all the revelations, and it just made me sick. You know, can't you guys just shut up and brew beer? No, like people denying all these the reality of all these stories. It was possibly more offensive to me than the stories themselves.
Agree with that. And I think, you know, education's an important thing. Now, obviously, the people who are making the worst of those comments, there might not be any reaching them, unfortunately. At least, you know, it'll take a lot of work. But, you know, I want to circle back to the historical context and then the book and the history of women in brewing. I think a lot of people, like brewery owners, are kind of aware of the broader arc of beer history and women's involvement in it. And I wonder if making that story more widely available to the general like beer drinking public will help in that education process of like understanding that like this isn't a new thing. Like beer didn't just suddenly come into existence in the 90s or something, you know, like this has been going on all throughout human history, and it's intersected a lot of the struggles that women have had throughout history. And, you know, that continues to be an issue. So I think it's really important to get these stories out there. Do you think that you're reaching a lot of people that are like beer consumers that are trying to learn more, or do you think it's more an audience of people who are interested deeply in history and beer and already were seeking out these sorts of narratives?
That's a good question. I am primarily hearing from the latter category. You know, the women who are in beer. I see men purchasing the book a little bit for themselves, you know, beer history lovers. I see men buying the book for their wives and girlfriends who are in the industry. I see friends of mine outside of the industry buying and reading the book, which is really nice. I haven't seen a lot outside that. And I would really like to reach a lot more people because as I say sometimes, especially when I'm trying to maybe make a sale, you know, you can get so much out of this book, even if you're not into beer at all. I mean, this tells the story of the patriarchy, you know, through beer. But it's not just about beer. This is human. This is the history of humanity.
Well, and I like how truthful the book is. Like it tells the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like it's, you know, oftentimes, you know, the text that we use growing up and the history that we learned is a very skewed version of the truth and what happened. But this is, you know, it's real. And I agree. I think anyone that has any interest in beer or any interest in women in the history of women or any interest in history at all would really love this book.
Absolutely.
I'm not as good at selling stuff as you are, Tara. You're gonna I liked the book. You should buy it, guys.
Yeah. Well, that brings up an interesting point that I want to ask about, Steph, because you mentioned how like a lot of the history that we sort of learned through the formal official channels is very whitewashed and, you know, written by the people in power, and so might gloss over a lot of the ugly things. Was it difficult in researching these stories for the book, in finding that truth behind, you know, the history written by the winners, as it were?
You don't mean emotionally difficult, right? You mean like
I mean, actually, like
difficult?
finding the information and knowing that
Yes.
it's reliable.
Yes. Even though I submitted the manuscript a year ago or so, I'm super on edge about finding out that I've missed some sort of, important person or, big fact. Because it was so hard to find. You should have seen me like 20 minutes before closing time at the national, what was it? Basically like the National Literature Society's Library of Finland. I don't speak Finnish. I'm like running through the library, pulling every book out that maybe looked like it could be something. The librarian there really helped me a lot. But because I was scared to miss the opportunity to find something that would be in there because it has been so difficult. And I'm really grateful for the work that's being done concurrently and before me, for the people who have done sort of this primary research that I haven't necessarily been able to do myself. And I'm thinking of like people like Christina Wade in Ireland or Tia Morton Edmondson in Oregon, who have really helped. They've put a lot of hard work into finding these stories. But like, for instance, an example that I quote a lot, and I mentioned it in the book, is that, the company that owns Squatters and Wasatch had this long history of the breweries, and it was all about Greg Scherf. I'm not saying that he wrote it, he might not have, but there was no mention whatsoever of Melly Pullman, who co-founded it with him, at all. I mean, I didn't stumble on her until, a couple years into research. And I also kind of live in fear. So I was also very interested. I'm just really interested in craft beer history in general. And so I did a lot of work to like dig up all these early breweries that have sort of been forgotten in history because maybe they were open like a year, 3 years, and trying to find out if there were women involved in those projects was difficult because there was like practically no information about them to begin with, right? And then to find out if there were women involved was laborious.
I also had to, every time you mentioned that you were alluded to being at a brewery or at someone's house while you were interviewing them, I always think about how, when we hang out with other beer people, you always share really tasty beer. So I do have to ask you maybe a little more lighthearted question. We've been kind of serious. Is there one of the more memorable meetups where you've had perhaps a very memorable beer while you were interviewing someone along the way?
Yes, and I don't remember what brewery it was or what it was called, but I can tell you about it, and I should make myself a note to call and ask and see if she remembers herself. Hanging out with Judy Ashworth, who was the publican from the 80s on the East Bay of California, who implemented a lot of the standards that we take for granted today in craft beer bars. Nobody smokes in bars anymore, but it was revolutionary at the time, and temperature controlled lines, etc. Well, so she's got this part of her house that she calls the Oasis, and my dear friend Herlinda and I drove out there one day, like right before the pandemic, and we stayed at her house, and she invited some of her girlfriends over and like some of her guy friends, and she's got like a refrigerator tap system that's got like 6 or 8 taps on it in her Oasis at her house. And she's almost 80, and she is so excited, as she was then as now, in exploring and promoting small local breweries. And she knows, she's been a judge for a long time. She knows her beer. She knows what's good. And she put on this like craft Polish style. And I don't think it was a Grodzki or anything. It wasn't anything I'd actually heard of, but yeah, it was from some like very small local California brewery making this obscure historical Polish style. And she was so excited about it, and so was I. And I'm sorry I couldn't tell you more specifically what it was, but it's just a fun experience, just the whole vibe there. And she's hilarious. And she's like, here, try that and try that and try that and try that. And she's got this amazing stuff. And, it was really cool because she's older, but yeah, she paved the way,
That's so amazing. What amazing memories you must have from this whole journey and the people that you've met and connected with. And that's just amazing.
It's been a real honor to meet so many phenomenal women and people. I've met some phenomenal men doing this research too. So to meet so many phenomenal people and have them trust me with their stories, in some cases personal stuff, and some high profile women whose names we know today, sharing, personal thoughts and aspects of their lives. I consider that to be a great gift. And I hope that I'm doing them all justice.
Well, before we let you go, there were two quotes that really stood out to me that I sort of look at as hope for the future of not just the beer world, but of humankind. Towards the beginning of the book, when you interviewed Irene Fermat, is that how you say it? Am I saying it correctly? So when you interviewed Irene Fermat from Hood River Brewing, which became Full Sail, which more people might know, said the best thing is to be treated as if there is no gender. And that line really struck me. And, because I've had conversations with people about how, how wonderful would it be if we could all just be called brewers and we're not female brewers, to just be, we're brewers and that's okay. Despite gender, I thought that was really hopeful and touching. And then towards the end of the book, when you quoted Dr. J, diversity means you are welcome here. Inclusion means I made this space for you. I mean, that I think I actually teared up when I read that part of the book, but powerful quotes and such strong women that you've shared with us through your words.
It's always interesting to hear what parts strike different people. And I know that's something that we as women in the beer industry struggle with. Do we segregate and create spaces like the Pink Boot Society? Or do we, do we feel like, why should we, call ourselves female brewers? We're just brewers. And I know that, and so what I usually say to that, because I am, an advocate for Pink Boots, is I am excited for the day when we don't need Pink Boots anymore. I believe until then, we talked about solidarity and allyship before. I think there's strength in coming together and supporting one another. What I actually just learned a couple of weeks ago is that Boston Beer has a lot of groups for employees. They've women's groups, they've got veterans groups, they've got parent groups, they've got LGBTQ plus groups, and on and on. And I hadn't thought about that from the perspective that you're saying, like, well, we're all just brewers, why should we do this? I can't wait for the day when Boston Beer employees feel like they're not needed anymore. And I can't wait for the day when everybody does, believe in full force and inclusion, where, everybody's contributions are valued equally, and we create the spaces like you're saying. I love that quote from Dr. J too. I quote it all the time. We made this space for you. That was revolutionary when I first heard her say that, just like you're saying, Steph. What's your reaction?
If that's not on a wall somewhere, it should be. That is a really good quote.
And the other thing that I'm hearing people say about inclusion is we don't want a seat at the table. We want to build a bigger table.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Same idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, very cool. thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Thank you even more for all the work you've done, but even besides the book with your journalism and everything, advocacy, and also just, talking about beer, which
Well,
is always
I will mention in the acknowledgments, you may have hinted at another book project. Is there something else in the works, or are you just back to good old journalism for a while?
That's true. I did hint at it. To say that it's in the works would be premature. It's not quite at that stage yet, but there are conversations. Pete Flossberg from Pete's Wicked Ale and I have been talking about writing a beer and dessert book together for a couple of years. And what most people don't know is after he sold Pete's to Gambrinus, he opened a chocolate company, which he then also sold. And he still makes chocolate. I was at his apartment recently and he brought me these malt balls he'd made and they were fantastic. So yeah, that will probably be the next project. And then I really would like to write another book about women in the alcohol industry after that. I don't know what that will be, but hopefully something that has as much meaning to as many people as this one does.
Well, you'll probably need to do a part 2 because there are so many amazing women in the beer industry right now. So there's so many more stories ready to be told. And when you and Pete are ready to do a beer and chocolate conversation with a podcast in person, hit us up. We'd be more than happy to be guinea pigs for that.
That just made me think, oh my God, I'm going to get really fat writing that book. We would be, I can't speak for Pete, but I'm going to speak for Pete. We would love to come back on your podcast and, from your mouth to God's ears.
I'll just keep nagging you. Tara, are you ready yet? You're ready yet?
Mm-hmm.
So the book is A Woman's Place is in the Brew House by Tara Nurin. Your website is eyesontheworld.us. I know the book is available on Amazon. That's where I got it. Any other places we should support to buy the book?
Yeah, it is available pretty much anywhere you can buy books online. It is available in the indie bookstores. It's available on bookshop.org, which is a place where you can designate that the funds go to your local indie bookstore, which is super cool. I've seen it at, some Barnes and Nobles, etc., but it's super helpful for people when they're perusing their bookstore to go ask for the book and be like, hey, this would be a great book for you to carry. Because like we said, I really would like the book to go beyond the beer world. Because I think that the messages are important.
And I know it might sound cliche, but honestly, for anyone looking for a Christmas gift for someone that loves beer, honestly, it is probably the best beer related book I've read in a long, long time. So I do highly recommend it. Even if Tara is listening or not, it would be a really cool gift.
And I just thought of this. It's a paperback, so it folds up nicely in a stocking.
Yes, it is. And it's easy to read in bed. It doesn't hurt your arms after a while.
It's great to read with the beer. A Christmas beer.
Good point. Good point. So wait, I'll let you try to end this segment.
I'm sorry. I preempted your final and very important question about what comes next.
My final thought.
Yeah. We could talk for hours and hours, and we often do on the show. Our listeners know. But thank you so much, like I said, for joining us. Thank you for all the work that you've done. We look forward to keeping tabs on your work and having you back, and maybe doing a food chocolate beer pairing event, because that sounds like a lot of fun. We love that sort of thing on this show. So, Tara, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Those were great questions. This was a really good conversation. It was really lovely to talk to all of you.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. To our listeners out there, you know the places to find the book. Go out and find it, and keep track of Tara, because she'll be doing a lot more cool things in the future.
Well, huge thanks to Tara for joining. I'd say us, but really the two of you. At some point in the future, I will have heard what you just heard, and I'm sure it will be and was riveting. There's that whole time travel shit again.
I think I follow you.
I don't know if I do. So if you do, hey, that's great. But no, thank you to Tara. I really look forward to. I want to get this book, and I want to read through it. And I want to see like all the other stuff that she's contributed to Forbes and whatnot. And I also didn't know that she was local-ish to us. Granted, It's Jersey, but it's like right across the river in Jersey. So thank you to her. Thank you to the two of you for having that conversation with her. I feel like, though, it is currently time for us to maybe play some kind of game.
Happy fun time games. It is the other white meat. Well, let's do it.
Okay.
All right. Cheers, Internet, and welcome to Happy Fun Time Games, the podcast trivia segment that is as pretty as a jewel-winged damselfly.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you. I wrote that down immediately. Today we are joined by Dan, Steph, and Dana because it's just us this episode. They're going to be playing the game. The game today is that celebration of bizarre brews that I call There's Weird in My Beer. Now, this is a game where I will tell you a little bit about a beer and give you 3 multiple choice options as to what the strange ingredient is, and you must guess what the weird is in each beer. There is a secret theme to this game that if anyone gets, will get at least 1 bonus point, possibly more.
At least 1.
Because it's going to be very difficult to figure out. We will begin, as we almost always do, to my left with Dan, our first beer of the game. This is a variation of Otter Creek Brewing's Over Easy Session Pale Ale. It is double dry hopped with Mosaic and Amarillo and aged on an extra something to complement the juicy hops. Is it Jell-O, Starbursts, or Jawbreakers?
I did not see any of those as viable options when you said the name of the beer. Can you run through the description one more time? I'm sorry. I have to, I'm caught off guard.
So this is a variation of a pale ale. The original is called Over Easy Session Pale Ale.
Okay.
This new variation has a different name. It's double dry hopped with Mosaic and Amarillo and aged on an extra something that complements the juicy hops. Is it Jell-O, Starbursts, or Jawbreakers?
I'm going to go Starburst.
Dan going with the Starbursts. Steph, what do you think?
I'm gonna say Jawbreakers.
Steph going with the Jawbreakers twice because it echoed. And finally,
I don't know what
Dana.
that was about.
I was thinking Starburst, but I kind of want to go Jell-O just to have a...
So all answers are represented.
All right. So we got a spread. All opinions represented here. And the only one that was correct was Dan, because it was Starburst. It was concocted for Beer Advocate's 12th annual Extreme Beer Fest in Boston. Otter Creek took their chronically crushable pale ale, upped the happiness by aging it on Starburst candy for 2 weeks. I almost said Starbucks.
It sounded like you said Starbusts.
That's what I heard.
Starbusts. I think that is what I said. It's called Rainbow Liquor.
Oh my God, that's a terrible.
Said Drew Vitaire, Otter Creek's media specialist, quote, rumor around the brew house is that an undisclosed member of the crew has a habit of dosing their boxed wine with these candies, which reveals some serious sweet, fruity notes. All that, added with the double dry hop dosage, creates one juicy bomb of a brew. There you go, Starbursts. In that beer, difficult to say. I don't know how easy it is to drink. Moving on to Steph, who is going to guess first on our next beer of the game. De Molen's Brewery in the Netherlands brewed up a unique saison for a beer fest that was made with a rather unusual ingredient, giving it hops in more ways than one. Is it rabbits, frogs, or grasshoppers?
What?
It's a saison, if that
God.
helps. Which it doesn't.
Grasshoppers? I don't know. I don't want to answer those. Grasshoppers.
Gonna go with grasshoppers. Okay, Dana?
I was actually thinking grasshoppers as well.
All right, we've got 2 grasshoppers. Dan, what do you think? I'm gonna go rabbit. Dan is going with rabbits. Incorrect. It was, in fact, the grasshoppers. It was for the 7th annual Buref's Beer Festival, a beer fest hosted by the brewery since 2009. The Moylan's brought their grasshopper saison, certainly a unique ingredient, and they are keen to note that the beer is not vegetarian and maybe not such a good idea. It seems grasshoppers may kill head retention, as a lack thereof is noted in several reviews of this beer. One reviewer went on to add that it had a murky, dirty yellow-green color, a medicinal aroma, and taste reminiscent of potpourri, and called it quite a vile beer, and basically a waste of good grasshoppers. So there you go, Grasshopper saison from De Molen's Brewery over in the Netherlands. Moving on to our penultimate beer of the game, and Dana is going to guess first on this one. This one is a collaboration between Rock Bottom Brewery, Milkman Brewery, and Bloom Brewing, who teamed up to concoct an American blonde ale for Pittsburgh Beer Week, apropos, in 2015, dosed with a certain addictive snack food. Is it Pringles, Doritos, or pork rinds?
Doritos?
Going with Doritos. Dan, what do you think?
Pork rinds.
Pork rinds. We've got Doritos. We've got pork rinds, Steph.
Yeah, I'm also going to say pork rinds.
Oh, very confident on the pork rinds. Incorrect. Dana was right. It is, in fact, Doritos. The beer was made with 2-row light crystal malts and the infamous tortilla chips in the mash. Not wanting to infringe on any copyrights, they decided to name it Ghoul Branch Burritos as opposed to Ghoul Ranch Burritos. And it was enough of a hint to let the drinkers know what they were in for. Reviews are decidedly mixed, to be a bit generous. The latest comment on Untappd simply reads, I don't even know. Don't even know. So we have one beer left in the game. Of course, we're going to add up the points, see where everybody stands. Dana in a commanding lead. I say commanding, only by 1 point. 2 correct answers so far. Dan and Steph each with 1. So we'll make Dana go first, and then I guess we'll just go to Dan and then Steph because it makes sense. Our final beer of the game comes from South Australia's Sweet Amber Brewing Company. They have gifted unto the world a goza that leans into the tangy, salty, and earthy side of that style and pays homage to the land that they call home. Infusing it with, is it eucalyptus leaves, Vegemite, or grubs and beetroot?
Vegemite.
Going with the Vegemite, yeah.
That was my gut reaction, but both parts were my gut reaction. The visceral response and saying that is the answer. Yeah, I'm going to go Vegemite.
All right, so gross and Vegemite. 2 Vegemites. Steph?
Oh, that's what I was thinking too.
I mean, you can hope to tie with Dan. Or you could take a risk and tie with Dana.
I don't know. Well, eucalyptus might be nice. But Vegemite is so Australia, and I know that there are beers that were made with Vegemite before. Fuck it, I'll just say Vegemite.
Everybody's saying Vegemite. Everybody's correct. What a way to end the game. Everybody gets a participation trophy. Yes.
Is it really?
The taste of Australia that we all know and love. Vegemite Goza boasts a uniquely dominant yeast aroma and unparalleled bitterness, with 20 kilograms of Vegemite added right into the boil. Australia's own breakfast of champions graduates from boring old toast to a pint of beer. So there you go. No surprises here. Everything just went up by 1. Our big winner with 3 out of 4 points this game is Dana. Tied for second place, Dan and Steph, each with 2 points apiece. Now, does anyone know what the secret theme was?
I'm trying to figure it out. I wrote down the
forgot
ingredients and the beer names, but I wish I would have remembered the countries.
I will give you a hint. Consider more the creator and not the content.
They were all beers made for festivals?
He pointed to himself when he said creator.
Oh.
Yeah.
They're all places Wayne wants to go.
All right, good guesses. Not correct. Dan, do you have a guess?
They're all things you have eaten.
I was going to say
Vegemite,
things you've recently eaten.
Grasshoppers.
No, I've never had Vegemite or grass. I don't think I've ever eaten grasshoppers.
Cool Ranch Doritos.
I've had Starburst and Cool Ranch Doritos like every red-blooded American has. All right, I'll tell you. It's because I'm lazy. All of these beers are from past games.
God damn it.
These are from 4 different previous versions of Weird in My Beer going back like 2 or 3 years.
Why am I not surprised?
Right?
Speaking of Weird in My Beard, I had a beard. Weird in My Beer. I had a pickle beer this weekend.
That's true. I had a pickle beard this weekend.
Perfect. East End Brewing and Permani Brothers collaborated on a pickle beer.
Oh, that's kind of
and
cool.
it was
That is cool.
really freaking good. It
Good.
had made with tons of cucumbers, and it had dill and coriander in it. It was a goza, and it was wonderful. Everything that I imagined when I've begged for pickle beers. Although a spicy pickle beer would have been good. I feel like they could also make it with a habanero, and it would just take it to the next level.
We got
But anyway,
some really good, I think it's called the Pickle Lady. They're like homemade pickles we got at a vegan food fest here in Philly that Jess and I and one of her friends went to. And one of them was like a spicy Bloody Mary pickle.
Oh,
And it was really good. And then we also got garlic pickles that were really good. I think it's just the Pickle Lady. I'm hoping saying the right name. Check out the Pickle Lady. I think they're in Jersey.
I love pickles.
But yeah, so the secret theme revealed, scores revealed. The only thing left to do is shout out to our most generous patrons on Patreon, people who donate at a level high enough to have your name read out loud in my voice on the podcast. What an honor. We would like to thank the following individuals: Todd Hills.
There's a hot dog I have to grab.
Ben Mengel. Feeling good as hell. Chris Mahoney. Let's talk about 7, baby. Dana.
I love games.
John Sullivan.
Sports.
Oh, where the hell?
PA Brew Review.
If you're not a lank, you're a wank.
So true. Topher Simmons.
No, fuck you, Dan.
God damn it.
Jill Chivers.
It's metal.
James Lamberg.
I like the beer tonton.
Eric Dixon.
Then he just got himself wet.
You can't hear Francisco without laughing. Where was I? Jen McDonald.
You are welcome.
Thank you. Brian Mills.
Fick me, stick it in a pooper.
Oh boy. And finally the one and only, that's No Maloney, Joe Mansell.
Best outtake ever.
As usual, if you want to find out how you get on this list and all the other cool behind the scenes perks and the warm and fuzzy feeling that you're supporting the podcast, go to patreon.com/beerbusters. But for now, we'll take a break to pay our tab.
Say, Yvonne, remember when I said I'd have to send away to NASA to calculate your bar tab?
Oh, yeah. We all had a good laugh, Mo.
The results came back today. You owe me $70 billion.
Spanish, English, French, German, Italian, Arabic, Chinese, Dari, Dutch, English, Filipino, Greek, Hebrew, Hindi, Indonesia, Irish, Japanese, Korean, Latin, Pashto, Persian, Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Spanish, Swahili, Swedish, Turkish, Urdu, and Vietnamese.
You almost landed it.
Fuck. It was close.
I'm going to guess these are the courses that Rosetta Stone offers.
They are. You can learn all of those languages through Rosetta Stone. You've heard of them. They set the standard in how to learn other languages. They have innovative, technology-driven learning solutions that are used by thousands of schools, businesses, government, and other organizations by millions of people around the world. They offer courses in the aforementioned languages. They have apps available on iOS and Android, so you can learn on the go. And right now, Rosetta Stone is offering listeners of Beer Busters podcast a 24-month subscription for less than $8 a month. How do you get that deal? I'm about to tell you, so listen close. Go to rosettapodcast.com/beerbusters. Couldn't be easier. 2 years, less than $8 a month. That is such a deal. Start your language learning journey today at rosettapodcast.com/beerbusters.
So I had an idea that so last episode we kind of did like an off the cuff prompt, and I kind of like doing that.
Yeah, that was fun.
I tried to think of like another question, and I hate to admit that I racked my brain for a while, and then it just came to me like 20 minutes ago. After like days of what can I ask that's interesting, and like, I don't even know if this is interesting. But Steph, you mentioned you were at Grist House when you were out in Pittsburgh, the one with the dogs, and they had a lot of different styles of beers that were on, and you wound up going with, I forget what you said you had. I'm so sorry.
Can I just say?
I don't think I said what I had at Grist House.
Did you?
No,
Was that the
actually,
one
I
that
don't
had
think
all
so.
the varieties?
No, that was
Dancing Gnome.
Dancing Gnome.
Shit.
I mean, Grist House did have quite the variety of beers as well.
We also did a TikTok there.
Yeah, we also did a TikTok there.
Oh my God. I just want to say how much I'm struggling to not look at what Dan has written down ahead of time, so I don't see the prompt before he says it.
Well, notebook is closed.
I'm doing pretty good.
So okay, so it wasn't Grist House, but still. So the idea is, you go to a place, they have a bunch of different styles on, or like maybe you're not even going to a brewery, you go to a restaurant or just a bar that has like a lot of local brews on and whatever. What's your thought process trying to figure out which beer you want to order?
First, I look at the lagers.
Okay.
I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I mean, if there's a lager, I'm going to order a lager. But I also look for, I look at the styles first. And I look for lagers, obviously, because that's usually what I want to drink, or something that I'm like, oh my God, I haven't had one of those in forever. Like we were at one brewery that I won't really mention because it really wasn't that fabulous.
Whoa.
But they had a Cascadian dark ale on.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
Which I haven't had in a while, nor have I had it at a place that still called it a Cascadian dark ale.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I haven't had one of those in a while. And like same thing with this red ale. Honestly, before I even knew that it was the purpose of the beer, I saw that it was a red ale and I'm like, oh, I haven't had a red ale in a while. So for me, it's those two things.
So say if you have a list of lagers in front of you, say you have, wherever you are, they have 4 lagers. You've had 3 of them before, and there's this one you haven't had. Do you chance it with the new one, or do you go with one that you've had before? And
Yeah,
you like?
no, I would probably try the one I hadn't had.
Well,
before.
especially because if you've had the 3 others, it probably means that brewery makes good lagers. So
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's right. Say if it's not necessarily brewery. Say you're at a bar.
Okay.
Say you're at a bar that like prides themselves on having local craft beer. Like I was at one last night, and I went with, they had a Märzen on, so I went with the Märzen because, you know, I have a feeling that season is ending soon and we won't see them again for close to another year, which is very tragic in so many ways. So I went with that. To your point, you know, style I hadn't had in a while, or like if I know it's going to be in limited supply, I'll go with that. But a lot of them were beers I'd had before, except for this one. And, you know, I wish I could remember the name of it, but I didn't, you know, check it in, which is forever my downfall.
Or if
Bless
there's like 4 lagers, I may do a flight just so I can try all of them and then get a pint of the one that I liked the best.
All right, so let's go a different way. Say you go to a place that has 100 beers on tap or whatever the fuck Pizza Boy has.
120.
Yeah. How do you narrow down there? Do you start with styles, or do you just like throw a dart?
So
and...
that's even more complicated. There, I start at breweries.
Okay.
So I look for particular, like when I used to go to Pizza Boy, I would usually try to start with a beer brewed at Pizza Boy. So I would narrow it down and I would look at like the 15, 20 beers that they had, and I would just focus on that part of the tap list and say, okay, what do I want to drink from there? So if it's a brewery and sometimes some bars that have that many beers, they also will divide the tap list. Like, because Pizza Boy, they divide their tap list up by brewery. The brewery names are in alphabetical order, and that's how the order of the taps. So probably because they organize it that way, that's why my brain looks at it that way. Where some places you go to, they organize it by style. So you can just go to the tap list and look at all the lagers or all of the stouts on. So I guess it depends for that many options. It depends how the list is organized.
Okay. Wayne, what's your thought process?
Well, if you're talking about a restaurant, if you're going to have a meal, and you're talking about like beers you're going to order with a meal, if you're not just going to drink beers, I go for the lagers first, and the lower ABV, because I like to have a nice clean lager. When I don't usually try to pair the style with what
I
I'm
thought
ordering.
that's where you were going.
No,
with
I
it, yeah.
don't. I just like to have a nice clean, like a Pilsner or a Kolsch or something to have with my meal. I think it goes good with everything, honestly. You can't go wrong. And then I'll save the more intriguing and perhaps higher ABV beers for after the meal. You know, so I'll get a smoked beer or a stout or, you know, some weird funky sour or something after I eat. I feel like in the case of like if you're just going out to drink or you're going to a place like Pizza Boy where there's a million things to choose from, it's really situational for me.
Yeah.
Like what I want to drink. It depends on who I'm with, what they're drinking, what we've been doing, what we're going to be doing next, what catches my eye, you know. But I think in a situation like that, I would look for first easy drinking beers, because if I know I'm going to have a few, I don't want them to all be like super acidic sours or like high ABV. And then interesting beers that I'm like, oh, that sounds, you know, like I wouldn't go and get like just a regular old double IPA because it's not my jam. But I would try like some crazy pastry stout just to like try it, like a small pour or something like that. But I would gravitate towards the crushable beers.
Crushable.
More often, especially as I get older. I want a beer that's easy to drink and doesn't get me super drunk.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a really good point. The ABV is a big factor for me, especially if it's like sometimes we'll go out to the Barley Mow on a Thursday night and I know I'm going to have 2 or 3 beers, but I have to work the next day. So I'm definitely narrowing my focus to beers that are lower in alcohol. So I can have a few, but, you know, not go home sober. That's important too.
Dan, what about you?
It's a mix of what you guys said. You know, I think everyone knows that we tend to gravitate towards lagers as we become older beer drinkers. So I'll start with that. Or like I said, if it's, you know, they got a Märzen on and it's, you know, the end of fall going into winter, even though we're not totally the end of fall quite yet, but like I'm going to get that because it's a limited run. You know, it's the same way that pumpkin people go for the pumpkin spice beers because you can only really get them for 8 months out of the year.
Pumpkin people.
Yeah. But I will look at ABV for sure. I'm not gonna lie, if the prices are on there, I kind of look at the price point too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get a $12 pint unless it's something super special.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Like when we were in Vegas a couple of years ago, it wasn't even a pint; it was a little pour of whatever Bourbon County they had at Goose Island location. That was expensive, but it was once in a lifetime. Not once in a lifetime, but it's a rare occurrence to come across that variant of it.
Yeah.
But like if I'm just out at a brewery, it's probably a lager. Like if I go to Love City, we talked about them earlier. It's Love City Lager or the Kolsch that they have on, or whatever Pilsner, or if they've Totally Wired, because I fucking love that beer.
It's really good.
We know.
I know.
It's a good beer. I love Sylvie, actually.
Oh,
Their
that's
stout.
a good one
so
too.
good.
Oh God.
Anyway,
but like you go to a place like Human Robot. Also, like they have a rotating list of beers that they may have on tap or you might have in cans. Like the Doppelbock is incredible. Obviously, there's Politamave, which is a stellar beer in every aspect. So like I'm going to go with one of those because I don't know when they're going to have it on next. I don't know if I can take a 4-pack of it home. So let me just have it now. Let me enjoy it. And I know what they're doing. But a place like that and a place like Love City, that, and I'm sure other breweries can be named, I'm sure. You know that everything they do is great. So you almost can't go wrong to an extent, depending on what styles you gravitate towards. Like you said, Wayne, I wouldn't do the crazy double IPAs or anything, but maybe if somebody in my group orders one, I'll take a sip or two if I can. Or like if a flight is an option, maybe
I'll
throw one of those in
to
there.
taste any beer.
Well, of course.
if it's being offered. But
yeah.
Well, and like you mentioned about Love City, there's certain breweries that if we hear they have something on, like whenever I hear that Poor Man's has a new lager on, because I know right now that's something that Ryan is, really diligently working on their lager program and doing a lot more of them. So whenever I see they have a new lager on, I'm going to swing by and if not get a pint of it there, definitely get some to go. In fact, when I was in Pittsburgh this weekend, our friend Dean Pierce, who is working there now, he had texted me and said that they have their Czech dark lager on now. And I was like, oh my God, I need to get there. And
yeah, I saw them post
luckily,
about that.
Eric happened to be there this past weekend and actually texted me a picture of the cans. And he's like, do you want a 4-pack of this? And I'm like, hell yeah, I want a 4-pack of that. So,
I should get Jared to get me something. So my friend Jared, who a past guest of the show years and years and years ago.
Very past.
Yeah, I know.
Single digits.
That was like episode 8. He just bought a house out that way, but he and his girlfriend are Mug Club members at Poor Man's. They love it there. And in fact, Cascadian Dark Ales, as it were. They had the black IPA from Poor Man's at their housewarming party last week, and I got to try some of it. It was incredible. Wow. It was just so great.
That's another thing that influences. It's like if you see a like traditional old world kind of style that you don't see, like a Czech dark lager, like a black IPA, or even English bitters and red ale, like the things they're not anything fancy or special. They're just old traditional styles that you just don't see.
They're not like the sexy one.
Yeah.
It doesn't sell, so it's kind of rare to spot one in the wild.
I don't think it's any secret that we're the types to gravitate to that more so than the crazy fruited sour with, a million things in it. Not that we won't drink that too, but our eyes definitely dart to those traditional European styles especially.
So, variable, what if there's a cask in the mix? Because the place I was at last night always has one beer on cask.
Got to try it.
Of course. I didn't last night, though. 9 times out of 10, I agree. I just didn't want to think. It was like I ordered a beer, server comes back, hey, you want another one? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll just take another one, whatever. But yeah, like that's another variable. Like how many times do you see a beer on cask? There's maybe a handful of places I can think of off the top of my head that have cask ales of some kind.
Another thing I was thinking of is I don't necessarily like seek out particularly unique beers like the Kveik yeast. Is that Kveik yeast beers that were like super popular for like a second? I only really enjoy those if I get to have them with someone who can tell me the story behind it.
Oh, yeah,
like on the
that makes
podcast
sense.
when we have special. But I don't seek out stuff like that, when I'm just out and about drinking, because I like the experience of learning about it from like someone who's made it or is like, super knowledgeable about it while I'm drinking it. And so I won't normally pick out that kind of a beer unless it's in a situation like that.
Or if you're with a group of people where you can open a bottle and share the tasting experience with them and have a conversation about it, which is also sort of a way of learning about it as well.
Yeah.
I agree. Those sorts of beers are more fun to drink with others and not necessarily on your own.
So what makes a beer fun to drink with others versus on your own? Just the fact that there could be a story?
If it's outside of what you're normally used to experiencing, and if it's not like stunty, like if it's like, oh, there's fried chicken in this beer, like, okay, great. Like, I don't think that's super fun to drink and talk about. It's just kind of silly.
Oh yeah, the one that we had on the show years ago.
Yeah,
there was no
but
traces
something
of
that
it.
like uses a strain of yeast that like is like super traditional but doesn't really
Yeah.
get used much anymore, or that uses malts that don't get used very often, or very like obscure hop varieties, or weird things like grisettes and things that are like very, very on the edge of being a beer kind of a thing.
Or if there's a story behind how the person got it. Like
Yeah.
if they were traveling or it's from a brewery that we've never been to.
If it was
and-
up their ass for 3 months.
Yeah, they put it up their ass on their way home from Belgium. Like those are interesting too. Dan, I have a fun story to tell you.
Okay.
That you will appreciate more than anyone else. So there
man.
was a beer on tap at Hitchhiker
I already love how this is going.
that I was like, I need to go to Hitchhiker while we're in Pittsburgh just to have this beer. It's a very anti-Steph beer. It is a dessert stout,
Okay.
but it had Oreos in it. And you know how much I freaking love
yeah.
Oreos.
Yeah, because they're vegan.
And not
among other
only
reasons.
that, the beer had a very punny name.
Ooh, what was it?
Can you guess what it was?
I mean, can I get a hint?
What was it? It was just, it's like a
Just-
stout.
It's a banned pun.
I'm getting Oreo Speedwagon.
Yep.
Of
No,
course.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Nice.
it's an Oreo beer and it's called Oreo
Well-
Speedwagon. I need to have this beer. Well, here's the end of the story.
Okay, there's more. Okay.
We get to Hitchhiker. I'm starving at this point, so I go to the Peruvian food truck first and order food. And Rich and my brother are walking into the brewery to get a seat. And literally the guy is up standing on the bar, taking down the sign for Oreo Speedwagon or Oreo Speedwagon as the guy who had that much of it left in his glass, because that's all that was left, was walking by them.
Oh no.
Oh, that's
And
tragic.
I was like, you fuckers.
Oh, that sucks.
So I did not, but maybe I would have hated it because those kind of beers are not my jam. I'm sure there's probably lactose in it too, and I do not like beers with lactose 99% of the time. So I'm sure, I mean, it could have been amazing and I missed out and it's sad, but it may have been disappointed me and then it would have been sad too. But
Well, we had the Oreo beer from Stickman.
yes,
was-
which
that
I
was great.
quite enjoy. I
Yeah.
love that beer a lot.
Actually, not a huge fan of it.
Didn't?
No.
But I love Oreos. You don't understand.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Shaler also have an Oreo Speedwagon beer?
That sounds familiar. Yes.
I'm sure there's other breweries that have made it. And I know
S'moreo
that
Speedwagon.
S'moreo.
S'morios.
S'mores are superior to
the
Oreo.
Veil. We had an Oreo, the
Hornswoggler.
Yeah, Hornswoggler.
Yeah, I was thinking of that. Yeah.
Yeah, with the Oreos. I just love Oreos.
Well, Oreos are great. You know, I never understood the McRib people and how crazy they go over like, oh my God, when's it coming back? Until I discovered Red Velvet Oreos. I understand them now.
Yeah, the dark chocolate Oreos with the chocolate fudge over them. Oh my God, they're so good.
Oh my God. I was at a place the other day and I saw they had Nutella Oreos now.
That's not surprising.
Yeah. I'm surprised it took them this long to get there though.
The coconut caramel, I think they had. Those are pretty good.
That
I've had
does
those.
not sound good.
The carrot cake ones are actually pretty good too. But I mean, that relies, and same thing with the red velvet ones, it relies on the cream cheese icing, and they actually use cream cheese icing in the Oreo way, which obviously makes it not vegan.
Oh, so those aren't vegan. I didn't realize there were
Yeah.
variations that weren't.
At least I'm assuming it isn't, because it confuses me how they're vegan to begin with. Like, that's supposed to be like a milk-based cream in the middle.
Yeah, but it's all chemical.
It's
Of
not.
course, of course, it's all chemical. But you know, the red velvet and the carrot cake ones, I'm sure, are not vegan. At least I'm hoping, because I also
I don't
wouldn't
know.
understand
I mean,
how that would work.
I could see it either way, because I don't think Oreo particularly, like, they don't tout that they're vegan, but I'm sure they also like appreciate that vegans can enjoy them,
Right.
And so they're not going to like go out of their way to stop making them vegan. So I don't know how they would do that.
The world will never know.
Hey Siri,
Moose face.
are red velvet Oreos vegan? Yes. No, what? So okay. Here we go. So the headline of this
Yes, they are vegan.
this webpage says, "Are red velvet Oreos vegan? Can vegans eat red velvet Oreos?" And then the first thing it says, answer, yes, fruit by the foot is vegan. What? But yes, I can corroborate what Steph says. It does say they are in fact vegan.
Well, ours says is the same question, and then it says it depends.
Oh.
Despite being vegan friendly, Yankee candles are not the most eco-friendly candles on the market.
Man, these websites really got to update their taglines.
Yeah. Also, nothing about being vegan. It was about being eco-friendly.
Yeah, that too. So let us know your thought process when you go to a bar, brewery, restaurant, whatever you use in your brain to determine what beer you're going to have. Tweet at us or comment on the episode post when it goes on to Instagram or at Beerbusters on both of those things.
Or message us on Instagram because that's probably the most.
But then it's not.
But we need public
We
engagement.
need public
We need
engagement,
encourage
so
public
more people.
engagement.
Obviously, message us and that's cool. But comment on the things and tweet at us. Well, it's a shame we couldn't have Tara on for the entire episode. I hope she's feeling better. Thank you to her for doing the interview. And thank you to both of you for doing that while I am gallivanting across the West Coast, lamenting over many things. I'm drinking my face off because that's what I'm going to do. But and what you should definitely do is check out our website. It's eyesontheworld.us, and the book is called Women's Place is in the Brew House, A Forgotten History of Alewives, Brewsters, Witches, and CEOs. And I very much want to read that book, and I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of it. And of course, I want to say thank you to you for listening. I know things have been in flux recently, and we do genuinely greatly appreciate your flexibility with us and staying on board and continuing to listen. And we're trying to make sure that we can get things out more on a regular schedule. Admittedly, I know this episode came out late. FYI, I'm calling that now. I was traveling when it was supposed to be published, so thank you for your understanding with that.
Dan was and will be traveling at the time this episode comes.
There's that podcast time travel stuff again, but thank you for being along for the ride. You can follow along. Like we said, there's Twitter and Instagram. We're at Beerbusters. That also goes for TikTok. Facebook, there's Beerbusters Podcast. There's BeerbustersPodcast.com. Don't forget to add /shop. There's YouTube.com/Beerbusters Podcast. And, of course, Patreon.com/Beerbusters. Where you
Just slash us left and right.
Slash and at Beerbusters.
Slash and at.
But unfortunately, this does bring us to the end of another episode of Beerbusters. Remember to give us a rating or review on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on, but do that for all of the podcasts you listen to. There's more of that public engagement that we need, and that's how the algorithms work. Well, hey, my name is Dan Baker. I am joined by my co-host and brewologist.
# making the algorithms work.
Also known as Steph Hefner. And the Demented and Fermented.
# no loss.
Also known as Wayne Baker. Remember, no squids were harmed in the making of this episode. No baby chicks were harmed either.
Just so all the pumpkin people are dead.
That's not nice. We love you, pumpkin people. We'll see you next time.
Should have learned to land planes.
What?
Should have learned to land planes. Planes landing. Somebody's got to do it.